So I chose that song to start my video because as I was reflecting, I thought how much of organizational behavior is kind of like that song from the Four Tops. Can't help myself. When we fail to understand people and how we're influenced, while we may not be so headstruck in love that we can't help ourselves, but I feel like we're unable to help ourselves from our own egos, personalities, and biases. And on a large scale, this is what I want to talk about. So the two main things I really learned was one, the importance of evidence-based management and how people really tend to underutilize it. And for better or worse, they have an overconfidence in their gut or natural intuition. And secondly, I gained a lot of insight on how personality can be a large influence in one's ability to perform a job, gained insight in how it's measured, and really how fluid it is. So, in terms of how my feelings have changed, I really want to start with evidence based management. I've always felt that evidence is important, but if I'm being honest with myself, I think it's really been secondary to my own gut and intuition. I think I'm a pretty intuitive person. I think I use my gut a lot, and for the most part, I think I've been relatively successful. So when I'm being honest with myself, I do think I value evidence, but I think it's always been secondary. And what we've learned in class is when you rely heavily on your gut, it really can get you in trouble. The New York Times article we read explained how Google was actually able to improve their hiring practices when looking for managers because they stopped following the status quo. They didn't necessarily look for just who performed the best skill-wise, but they found what their employees, they looked for the evidence, actually valued, things like leadership and communication. These helped them improve their profits as well as selecting the better managers. It also explained how hospitals were able to cut down on malpractices. Conversely, it also explained a lot of negative situations in which poor evidence-based management was not employed. For example, the increase of malpractice suits, or the New York City school district that spent almost $60 million on a teacher incentive program that had little evidence of working in the first place. And the reason because of this, and I took a quote out of the article I really liked, is that overconfident decision makers may acknowledge the use of a practice is inefficient for most others, but they believe they're so talented that the usual findings don't apply to them. And upon reflection and being honest with myself, I realized that this is something I kind of bought into and I kind of believe. To give you an example, over the summer I worked at Vivint where I went door to door selling security systems and smart homes to people, and I came out late. Everyone else had more experience than me. They had already sold accounts, but I worked hard. I learned the sales process, and I was kind of an all-star. Initially, I'd follow the sales process where I asked people a lot of questions. I found out their hot points, and I really gathered that evidence to build a custom package that was just for them. And I got a lot of success for it. Pretty soon, I was one of the top reps on my team. What happened over time was when I got moved to higher paying neighborhoods, I relied so much on my previous experience that I stopped asking questions. I stopped looking for evidence, and ultimately, my sales fell off a cliff. Because the people in these neighborhoods didn't have the same problems that the other people did, but I felt I knew the answers already, and I stopped looking for evidence. What I found way too late was that these people were actually great customers because they had old systems already put in, which easily could have been converted for low cost to them. And they actually did want the hand-touch systems. So because I stopped looking for evidence, I actually lost thousands of dollars in that neighborhood. This was also similar to Shannon Folk, who shared a similar story of how she tried to implement strategies her old company was using, which didn't make sense for her current position. Ultimately, using evidence is something we need to be really careful about and make sure we implement. The second thing where I felt my opinion has changed a lot was about personality. I think I've underutilized how important personality can be with job and job fit. And then initially, I also think I didn't understand how fluid personality was. Our personality, especially at my age, is constantly changing. And even after it stabilizes over time, it's still changing gradually. And I think the value of understanding this change is you don't have to, and where my opinion changed is your personality is not fixed, that there are ways to improve. Thinking back at my time at Vivint, I would describe myself as a pretty introverted person, but through that experience, if my extroversion was a 3, I think it's now closer to a 5. So really understanding that your personality is able to evolve, I think gives you a lot of room to grow as a professional and as an individual and as a person. And more importantly, I think understanding the importance of personality in work is really important, especially when you understand how it's assessed. So the TED Ed video shared how most of the personality tests, whether it be Big Five or Myers-Briggs, have a number of problems, including but not limited to the results being self-reported, people being self-conscious and looking to please, forcing people to make choices that they can't really decide on, and assuming that personality is stagnant and that doesn't move. So because of this, they're not very telling besides personal use, which I think was a big thing to use, especially when we examined the Wall Street Journal and they talked about how we're now using AI and things like HireVue to help assess personality and fit. So as someone who strives to be a manager and make important decisions, possibly considering hiring, I think it's really important to, one, understand the importance of personality, but also the limitations we have um, in addressing it, to make sure that we don't shut people out because of tests, and ultimately not get the most beneficial outcome that we could. So far I learned a lot from this first part of the semester, and I look forward to the next part. Thank you.